Hi again. This is part 3 of Samuel Andrews, Christianity and Anti-Christianity and their final conflict. We've already given James Gray the intro to Samuel Andrews and also Samuel Andrews' preface to the second edition. This is his original preface to the book, as published in 1898. The aim of this book is not historical or polemical. It does not repeat in detail the opinions of the early fathers or of later writers, or enter into the controversy whether Nero or Muhammad, the Pope or Luther, the papacy or Protestantism be called the Antichrist. There is a true sense in which it may be said, let the dead past bury its dead. It is in the light of the present that we must re-examine the prophetical problems of the past. As the purpose of God draws nearer to its fulfillment, passing events will tend to show in their distinctive features the nature of that fulfillment. It is therefore for us of today to note the religious tendencies of the present and to consider carefully their bearing upon the divine purpose in man, as it has been made known to us in the Scriptures. To those who believe that God, who knows the end from the beginning, has through his prophets and his Son declared this purpose in its outlines for the guidance of his children, our inquiry is of deep interest, or the deepest interest. We ask, to what stage of his actings have we come? What are the religious characteristics of the present time? If the right discernment of the religious character of an age is always to those living in it of the highest importance, the right discernment of the present time is especially important to us, if, as we are told by not a few, it is in many points to be distinguished from all that have preceded it. Today, indeed, is always the child of yesterday. The continuity of history is never broken. Yet, history tells us of successive stages of religious development, each having its own marked features. Whether we have come to a new stage must be determined by its special characteristics. Let us therefore note what is said of the present time by representative men regarding it from very different points of view. What new religious elements do we find in it? In what direction are they developing? And what is the goal? It was said early in the century by the German philosopher Schelling, noting the tendencies of philosophic thought around him, as regards the past, there is striving a complete new age, and the old cannot comprehend it, nor has it a distant presentiment how distinct and complete is the antagonism to it of the new. Now, Schelling would have said this at the beginning of the Napoleonic era. Lecky, in his History of Rationalism, said this: it has long been a mere truism that we are passing through a state of chaos, of anarchy, and of transition. During the past century, the elements of dissolution have been multiplying all around us. The days of Athanasius and of Augustine have passed away, never to return. The controversies of bygone centuries ring with a strange hollowness upon the ear. And Cardinal John Henry Newman, who in that generation that Andrews was a young man, had moved from Anglicanism to Catholicism, Cardinal Newman later said this, in his book, The Patristical Idea of Antichrist. He speaks of, quote, a special effort made almost all over the world, but most visibly and formidably in its most civilized and powerful parts, an effort to do without religion. Truly there is at this time a confederacy of evil marshalling its hosts from all parts of the world, organizing itself and taking its measures, enclosing the Church of Christ as in a net, and preparing the way for a general apostasy from it. That's the end of Cardinal Newman's thought. And here's Leslie Stephen in his book, Agnostic's Apology. He says, I conceive that a vast social and intellectual transformation is taking place, and taking place more rapidly now than at almost any historical period. I cannot say what will be the outcome of this vast and chaotic fermentation of thought. The creed of the future, whatever it may be, exists only in germ. Philosophers, not apostles or prophets, are founding a philosophical system, not a religion. End of quote. And Godwyn Smith said this, quote, "There is a general feeling that the stream of history is drawing near a cataract. There is everywhere in the social frame an outward unrest, which, as usual, is the sign of fundamental change within. Old creeds have given way." End of quote. And Gronlund, the socialist, said this, "All signs and portents show that the face of mankind has already been set in a socialistic direction. There has been the access of a new, rational, divine order in human life, which that rather is disintegrating the old, outward, and temporary organization and gradually creating the new." End of quote. Cunin, the biblical critic, one of the first great voices of the high criticism, or higher criticism as we call it now. Cunin said this, "The problem of the future is especially serious now when so much is being superseded and is passing away, when a new conception of the world is spreading in ever wider circles, when new social conditions are in the very process of birth. In us the ends of the ages meet, the ends of the old and the new." And Professor Sohm, in his Outlines of Church History, said, speaking of culture, quote, "This tendency has become more and more powerful since the middle of the century, and is hostile not only to the ecclesiastical and Christian, but to every religious theory of the universe. The society of our day is like the earth on which we live, a thin crust over a great volcanic, seething, revolutionary heart of liquid fire. More and more clearly are shown the signs of the movement, the aim of which is to destroy the entire social order of the state, the church, and family. Unbelief has grown up among us, an unbelief which is kindling the revolution of the 19th century." That's the end of Professor Sohm's quote. And Kidd, in his book Social Evolution, says this, "The present is a period of reconstruction. A change is almost imperceptibly taking place in the midst of the rising generation respecting the great social and religious problems of our time. We are rapidly approaching a time when we shall be face to face with social and political problems graver in character and more far-reaching in extent than any which have been hitherto encountered." To the thoughtful mind, the outlook at the close of the 19th century is profoundly interesting. History can furnish no parallel to it. We seem to have reached a time in which there is abroad in men's minds an instinctive feeling that a definite stage in the evolution of Western civilization is growing to a close, and that we are entering upon a new era. End of quote. Utterances like these, repeated in sermons and lectures, in books, magazines, and the daily press, meet us on every side, all alike proclaiming a new age at hand. Whilst differing widely as to the final result, there is general agreement that we have come to the borderline that separates two eras, that we have left the old behind and are now entering the new. This is in itself a most remarkable fact. What is its significance? Why a new age? Are our old beliefs, our old institutions outgrown? Are we about to break with the past and take a sudden leap onward? What has aroused this general feeling of restlessness, this widespread discontent with the present, these eager anticipations of something better soon to come? In considering the significance of this fact, our attention is here given chiefly to its religious bearing, although a change in religion necessarily brings with it a change in every department of human thought and action. When the new age has finally developed itself, what religion will it give us? Will it be some new phase of Christianity, or an eclectic religion, or something distinctively new? Here the anticipations of men differ widely. Let us attempt to classify them. And he goes first to what we might call the amillennial assumption, which had characterized the church since the days of Augustine, so at this point about 1300 years. First, those Christians who believe that the kingdom of God was established in the earth and the reign of Christ begun when he ascended into heaven, or perhaps when the Roman Empire acknowledged Christianity. This is said by many or most in the Roman, Greek, and Anglican communions. They therefore look for no change in belief affecting essentially the creeds or rituals of the church. As a divine institution, it is permanent, and this ensures the permanence of the present Christianity. No new religious era is to be looked for. Its supposed signs are fallacious. The future will be as the past in all its main features till the Lord returns to final judgment. Now, the second view, the one that's tended to dominate in these progressive days of the late 19th century, is this, chiefly to be found, by the way, in Protestant bodies who think but little of the church as a historic institution to be preserved unchanged, but believe that there will be a wider and ever-growing spread of Christianity as a spiritual influence till the world is leavened. This class would retain, for the most part, the Protestant confessions of faith without any vital doctrinal or other changes. The new era, they expect, will come through a Christianized civilization and the enlargement of Christendom to embrace all nations. Then there's the third group, so-called liberal Christianity. Those who, having the same expectations as to the spread and triumph of Christianity, affirm that it must have large modifications in order that it may be adapted to the present conditions of religious inquiry. It is amongst these that we find many leaders of modern thought. They affirm, to use the evolutionary phrase, that the organism must be adjusted to its present environment. The church, both as to its doctrines and polity and labors, must respond to the demands of the new age and adapt itself to its needs. As to the extent of these modifications, there are wide diversities of opinion. Some would give up only those doctrines and rites which are most offensive to the spirit of the time. Others would go further and put away a large part of what has been regarded as distinctive in Christianity, that it may serve as a basis for a universal religion. But most have apparently no clear conception of what they must give up or retain. I think we can say with the rearview mirror, though, that this 125 or so years ago, this has been superseded by now what we call the woke church. And a fourth option, what we might call Christian agnosticism or agnostic Christianity. Those in all sections of the church who see clearly enough the rapid religious changes all around them and feel the power of the growing revolutionary tendencies and are greatly perplexed what to think of the future or what to do. They ask anxiously, where are the proposed modifications of Christianity to end? Is it true that we are at the beginning of a new and better age, or is the light of a glorious dawn that is beginning to illumine the heavens, or the lurid gleam of far-off volcanic fires? They know not what to believe in the present, or what to expect in the future. Faith in God, in the Scriptures, in the Church, does not wholly fail, but they are disquieted in spirit and sad in heart. Now, if this can be said in the 1890s, think of how it felt about 20 years later during World War I. So we have the advantage of retrospect. We're going to go on to other thoughts. Andrew is describing the sentiments that were common, the spirit that was in the air at the turn of the 20th century. I'm going to put a link in to something that was going on in the very same decade, namely William M. Ramsay, who is a great Oxford scholar and an unbeliever in the 1870s and 80s, became an archaeologist specializing in archaeology of what was called Asia Minor, what we would call Turkey today. And Ramsay's unbelief gave way to belief during the same period that many other people, Christians, churchgoers, were disquieted, as Andrew says here. I'll put in a link to Ramsay's testimony, and all of the books he wrote are still worth reading and still republished, by the way. And also I'll put in a link to our Doubt and Christian Apologetics playlist. See you next time.